We
Hi.
are. So, hey, how's it going, bro? Good to see you
Yeah.
again. It's been a while.
It's been 30 days, huh?
Well, it's always 30 days, right? So not too long, right? Yeah.
it,
We're,
it
we're
it
we're
seems
getting tired of each other now.
it
We
seems
can't
like
get
a
tired of each
lifetime.
other.
If we
It
get
it
tired of each
does.
other, how can we
Then
explain
we
what we
then we,
did?
we gotta stop
Ooh,
this. Which is not happening, folks. Don't worry. We're not getting tired of each other. By the way, Rudy was here last month. You
I
remember that,
was.
right? Yes.
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 So, guys, welcome once again to another episode of Chá Pedagógico. This is
Yeah.
episode number 8. Today
Oh,
is August
wow.
25,
Yeah.
Sunday. Here in São Paulo, the weather is no, I'm not going to do that. But this is
Yeah.
episode number 8 of this new era and that we're here with
Yeah.
Disal. And today we have an amazing,
Well,
extra amazing, uber amazing episode.
we'll let you be the judge of that, okay, folks. We think it's amazing, but it might not be. But we do have reasons to say that, right, Rudy? Because we're
Yeah.
going to talk about
The
one
goat.
of the biggest, well, the goat, the
The
Brazilian
Brazilian
goat,
goat.
the Brazilian goat. Yes,
Oh,
that's it, right? The greatest of all time. And
yeah,
and we actually told you, for those of you who don't think Paulo Freire is the GOAT, stay with us, okay?
yeah.
Stay with us till the end of the episode because we have our reasons. We
Hmm.
have a lot of things to share. And we are not experts in Paulo Freire, okay?
Mm-mm.
We have read some of his books, we've applied some of his things, but we're trying to bring what he did in terms of contributions, to our area,
Yes,
to our areas, right?
yes,
Neuroscience and linguistics, right,
yes.
Rudy? Yeah.
Because basically, what Paulo Freire said in many of his studies and his lectures and
Yeah.
books, etc., 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 is about social experience and social background. And
Exactly.
we've been saying the same thing for at least 5 years, that social experiences and social interactions and everything that's social basically is the trigger for cognitive activities. So
Most definitely. Yeah.
how come can we or could we actually separate what Paulo Freire said and has been resonating over the decades from cognition, from what we
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
Everybody knows, or many people, many of you know that I'm a cognitive linguist. Andre is a neuroscientist. So it would be impossible to separate both things because, again,
That's true.
it's about social interactions. Actually, everything that's social, the
Yeah.
social background, the social aspect of education. And that's pretty much what we're going to do here. We're going to debunk a lot of things. We're going to analyze many things that he wrote, that he said,
Yeah.
and we're going to see if we can apply or how we can apply, if we haven't yet, to the
I
classroom.
think we are applying a lot of things. We're not aware of the things we're
Yeah,
applying. But I got to tell, so I love when Rudy calls me a neuroscientist. I'm not really a neuroscientist,
you
guys.
are.
Well, I'd have to be a researcher working at a department in a university doing neuroimaging studies to become a neuroscientist. But, I have a foot, let's say, in cognitive neurosciences, especially learning and teaching. And one of the things that I think really aligns with Paulo Freire's approach here is that Paulo Freire has been able, I mean, he was able decades ago to make a very important shift, right, Rudy?
Yeah.
Of basically what was going on before Paulo Freire, and then Paulo Freire came along, and then something changed, and even today people are still trying to figure out how to use what he's talked about. But I want to say to everyone listening to us, because I really want you guys to be aware of who we are talking about. We're talking about a guy who's written more than 40 books. Okay, we're talking about a guy who created a revolutionary method to make 300 adults learn how to read and write in 40 hours in
Yeah.
Angicos, Rio Grande do Norte, okay? In 40 hours, he taught 300 people how to read and write using his method. We're talking about a guy who's taught at Harvard University, Geneva University. He's got more than 40 doctor honoris causa, accreditations, let's say.
Yeah.
from all over the world, really, including Oxford and Cambridge. We're not, and he's the third most cited author in the humanities in the world. That's
Yeah.
who we're talking about. Just so you guys know, you know, it's not
That's
just anyone.
that's
Yeah,
why he is the Brazilian goat. But before we
yeah,
actually get into what he said and and everything that he's studied, I would like. Well, there's one of his books is called "A Pedagogy for Liberation,"
yeah.
and it's basically a dialogue that he had with one of his friends called Ira Shor. I
Sure,
forgot.
right?
Shore.
Yeah,
Ira Shor.
yeah,
Yes, that's him. Ira Shor. And Ira Shor, of course, it's a dialogue, and they are talking about a lot of stuff related to education, educational systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Ira, and there is a moment in the book that Ira talks about when he was a student in
yeah,
school. And I would love to share this passage with you. It's not that long. So I'm going to read it to you what he said in the book, A Pedagogy for Liberation, that he wrote together with Paulo Freire. So he
yeah.
starts, I would read on my own, do the homework, and resent going to class. Boredom made me mischievous in school, and I became what they call a discipline problem. Yet, I was extremely curious about things, even though school bored me and bored the other kids also. We were much smarter than school allowed us to be. We were being treated like morons and turned into robots, and I rebelled against this stupidity. Continuing, he continues actually. At the same time, I was wooed by the teachers who told me I was smarter than the other kids and who asked me to play by the rules so I could do well in the future. My mother had to come to school to discuss my behavior with my teacher, and a lot of pressure was put on me to shut up. My mother took a day off from work and complained that school was boring me, but my teacher embarrassed her by saying she had just have to find the money to put me in private school if I needed such special classrooms. Ashamed of being working class, my mother backed down and told me to obey the teachers. I caved in and kept quiet for a long time. I became a star student and a teacher's pet. The tables of power were nicely turned here. The teachers began to love me, and my friends began to hate me. I I had I had switched sides in the culture war of the school. I went on like this in a cocoon of being good and silent until the upheaval of the 60s started with the civil rights movement. I started marching and got swept into the new protest culture. I was wonderful to fly again and protest with others. This is what
Look at that.
Ira Shor said about himself when
Yeah.
he was in school. Assuming
More than
that he,
5 decades ago, right,
more than
Rudy?
5 decades ago, I'm
Yeah.
assuming that he was in school in the 50s because in the
Yep.
60s he said, oh, the 60s arrived, the 60s came. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this description of his life, of his school life, was basically the late 50s or mid late
Yeah.
50s. And why did I want to start from this point?
Yeah.
Uh, because even though this was 5 decades ago, we still see.
Does it ring a bell?
Exactly. We still see many
Yeah.
Irish shores here in Brazil,
Yes. I mean,
you know.
all over the world, in Brazil particularly, but yes. And you know, one of the things that really got me when I started reading about Paulo Freire and his work was that for the very first time, I mean, not he was not the pioneer in the world, but certainly in Brazil. But he started challenging the status quo, and he started challenging the idea of hierarchy in the classroom. So it was basically not just sitting passively receiving knowledge through a teacher centered approach class, you know, but also questioning, why do I have to learn this? Why do I have to learn this way? Why can I not learn this other thing that I'm good at, but I'm interested in, but nobody talks about, right? So that's very interesting that Ira Shore mentioned something like that, because you know what, guys, school hasn't really changed a lot, right?
Yeah. Yes.
School is
Absolutely.
pretty much the same, you know?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely right. And even though a lot of people say that, let me just open the window a little bit, even though it's cold, but it's getting warmer here. So
Yeah.
even though a lot of people say or uh, falsely claim that Paulo Freire is one of the reasons why the Brazilian educational system has failed over the last,
Yeah.
I don't know, these guys never say a specific period of time, but
No.
they blame on Paulo Freire the failure of the educational system that we've had here in Brazil. But still, we are going to see that what he said in simple terms, what he said was, we need to acknowledge and we need to use the social background of our students. We
Yes.
need to listen to our students and use their social background and bring actually their social background to the classroom. We need to use their social background in the classroom because that's going to be the bridge. This is going to be the link to the content you have to talk about in the classroom.
Yeah.
Nothing more than that. He never talked. There's actually in the other book
Yeah.
called it's
Pedagogy
not
of
the
the
oppressed.
oppressed,
No,
or
the other one. Let me just, I forgot the name. I'm going to get the name back.
freedom, pedagogy of freedom, liberation,
For
or
no, liberation is this one. There is another one I'm going to remember
yeah.
in a moment. There's a chapter that he says education for ethics.
Aha. Yeah.
How come people say that Paulo Freire disrupted, not disrupted because disrupted can be good sometimes, but
Yeah.
how could Paulo Freire have destroyed their educational system when
Yeah.
he overtly said, look, you have to be ethical. And not even for
Yes.
a second, not even for a second, he says that teachers shouldn't have authority in the classroom and that students should do whatever they want to do in the classroom and
No, it's
teachers
not like
would
that.
swallow
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
He never
It's
mentions
about
that.
dialogue,
It's
and
about,
that's why it talks
yes.
about dialectics, and I think you gave people the answer to the poll, man. So
Which,
our
by
big
the way, yeah,
sister,
well,
yeah, our
yeah,
big sister had just
I
posted.
forgot. I forgot to mention the poll.
But let's
Yeah.
see if people were paying attention, and there are more people joining. So you guys, you have a question there. Which do you consider to be essential in your classroom practice? And then you can answer whatever you want, but we're looking for.
No. They can't. There are 4 options only.
Well, that's the thing. You have to choose 4 options, but there's one that is more aligned with what Paulo Freire
Yeah.
addressed, and I think Rudy kind of gave you the answer a little bit, but that's okay
I just
because
wanted to
that's the
see if they
thing.
were. If I wanted to check if they were paying attention to what we were saying.
but this is what we call now. So if anyone asks, what has Paulo Freire created in terms of approach pedagogy? So everyone will talk about critical pedagogy. The idea is critical pedagogy, which basically means that nothing is given. You have to basically question the position and the interests of the syllabus that you are trying to implement. For example, why do I have to teach using this book X? Why do I have to follow this sequence, this pedagogical sequence? Why do my students have to sit in rows?
Yeah.
Why can they access this or that? So this is really about critical pedagogy is trying to question whether those things make sense, if they're favoring certain people or classes, let's say social classes in the country or not,
Yeah.
and who is losing from this dynamic, right? So
Yeah.
that's the whole point of critical pedagogy. That's why it's
Yes.
not a given. You have to challenge the status quo, right?
Yes. Always.
Yeah.
Always. And I remember the name of the book. The name of the book is Pedagogy of Autonomy. Sorry. Pedagogy
Yes.
of Autonomy or Pedagogia da Autonomia. I actually don't know if there's this version of this book in English. That's why I'm giving the
Yeah.
title of the book in Portuguese as well. But if there is, considering
Yeah,
the
there is.
titles, there is,
There
right?
definitely,
Because I
yes.
only
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
Portuguese version. I do have the
Yeah.
Pedagogy for the oppressed, and
Yes.
the Pedagogy for
Pedagogy.
Liberation.
Yes.
but these two are in English. But this one, I could only find it in
Yeah,
Portuguese. So
if I'm not mistaken, this one was published in 97 or 6. So there are translations. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. The original version was, I think it was published in 1968. But
yeah,
Paulo Freire had been exiled. He was living in Chile at the time, and the book was only published in Brazil in 1974 because
yeah.
of well, we had a dictatorship at the
Did
time, right,
we?
guys?
Because
Well,
some
some
people
people
say that
tried
we
to,
didn't
yeah.
have. So I'm starting to believe that we
But
didn't have
yeah.
a dark period, an obscure period.
Exactly. So he was not allowed to publish. He was actually expelled from the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
basically, yeah.
and in fact, not only this one, but also Pedagogy for Liberation is the book that he wrote when
Yeah,
after he came back from the exile, because
exactly.
he started having some conversation, and then he finished having this conversation after he came back from his exile. So yeah,
Yeah.
you know, but I think many of you may be asking yourselves or trying to ask us the title of this episode, Eve did
Yeah.
not see the grape. Because again, one of the foundations of what Paulo Freire said is the knowledge of our students' social background. This is the foundation of basically everything that he said and
Yeah.
has been resonating through the decades. I don't know if you remember, if you guys are like 35, 40, 50 in your 50s,
Yeah.
probably you're going to remember the school period when you were in school and you had what we call here in Brazil cartilhas. I had
Oh
cartilhas when I was in
yeah.
school. I learned
Our
how
our
to,
textbooks. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And what was a cartilha? It was basically a test book, and there were many random examples
Yeah.
of letters, and you had to copy the letters and copy the words, and then you had to say the words out loud so you could practice pronunciation. So basically, that was a cartilha was. That was that's what a cartilha was. And again, super random examples. And one of the very famous examples that Paulo Freire fought against was a Eva viu a uva,
Yes.
the v.
Yeah.
And not only Cartilhas used these examples, but other examples. So, for example, I remember one that was in my Cartilha. I don't know why I remember that. There's probably a reason why I remember that.
Probably
But
because you had to repeat it a lot of times,
yeah,
bro.
but
Yeah.
this one caught me. It was
Yeah.
Chali. And
Okay.
then
Yes.
the examples were a vovó viu o chale, a vovó usou o chale. Super
Yes.
random examples. And this is one because we had to practice the letter X. Chale in Portuguese is kind of like a scarf, I guess. I
Yeah.
guess I can call it a scarf. I'm not into fashion, so if there's a
Yeah.
more technical name for
Maybe
chale
there's a
other than
better word,
scarf,
but I don't know.
probably there
Yes.
is, but a scarf.
Yeah.
And it in Portuguese it's chale, and it's written with X in the beginning of the
Okay.
word, and we had to practice that. And of course, 40 years later, here we are talking about this and being critical
Yeah.
about the system because again, um, a Eva viu
Yeah.
a uva. Who's Eva for the students?
And why a grape and
Why a
not a
grape?
right?
Because
Oh,
it,
okay. I just Shali's shawl. Yeah, I was
for
thinking because
real.
of Star Wars. Yeah, like when you, yeah, it's a shawl.
I
But
really
anyway,
suck at this,
but
man.
but why? But dude, yes, keep going.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something before you finish that sentence. The whole point of exercises like that was really, there's an alliteration in that
Mhm.
sentence. So the repetition of the same consonant,
Yeah.
basically. And
Mhm.
and so according to the best minds of education at the time and even today, that will make it easier for people, for kids, especially kids, because that's the time, the age we're usually learning how to read and write, because they'll get used to the sound and to the spelling
Yeah.
v, right? And
Yeah.
that's why we use those completely arbitrary, nonsensical examples just to
Yes.
make sure that we repeated the consonants, right?
And
Yeah.
for those who are
Yeah.
not from Brazil, and you guys are watching us,
It's like she sells seashells at the seashore,
yeah,
or like a tongue twister, you know?
exactly. But here in Portuguese is a very is not like a sound based language. It's more
Yeah.
like a spelling language is a spelling based language.
It's a more
So
transparent language, right?
yes,
Because what you see,
um,
you read
is what you
basically, and you
get
pronounce.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
What you see is what you get. So that's why they thought at the time, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, more than that even, they
yeah,
thought that it was a fantastic idea to emphasize the alliteration, the repetition of these sounds, because
yeah.
the sound of v, phonologically speaking and phonetically speaking also, is directly linked to the letter V. So we wouldn't have
Exactly.
it here in Portuguese. We don't have, actually, we kind of like a do, but it's very rare to have a letter that doesn't correspond to a phoneme, you know.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's pretty much it. But again, why did Paulo Freire criticize that? Because as I was saying,
Yeah,
who's Eve for the students?
yeah.
Why grape? And
Exactly.
why see the grape and not ate the grape?
Yeah,
And
because you need
again,
the letters, right? You need the letter V, right?
so there's
Yeah.
no communication with the students. The students were
Yes.
basically, as I said, as I read the passage in
Yeah.
the book, students were forced. It was a top-down situation. The teachers came with the countenance said, "Look, I am the full possessor of this knowledge. Here
Yeah.
is my knowledge. You have to do this." There was no critical thinking whatsoever at the
Times,
time.
bro, it was they were just replicating what they found in course books, you know.
Yeah.
And then who actually created the curriculum or the syllabus of that course book? And one of the things that Paulo said, he said it's not enough for students to know how to mechanically read Eva viu a uva or Eve saw the grape or anything. They have to understand what position Eve has in society. They need to
Hmm.
understand where grapes come from and
Hmm.
who commercializes grape,
Yeah.
and things like that. So they had to have a critical view of what they were learning. So it was not just mechanically memorizing things. It was really questioning whether those things were important or not, depending on their context. And
Yes.
again, that's why Eva viu a uva may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people who come from a country or from a region where you don't eat a lot of grapes. And the cool thing about Paulo Freire, that this has a lot to do with how he was able to make all those 300 adults,
Yeah.
learn how to read and write. Because, a lot of people used imported methods of helping people learn how to read and write. And he said, you know what? We need to focus on those people's social background, like Rudy said. We need to, okay, why am I going to use this pre-made sentence that I got from a course book that comes from Europe, probably, or
Yeah.
from the United States, if I can actually use the tools? Because those people were farmers, so we can use the tools that they use every day to teach them how to spell those tools. And it's
Yeah.
part of their background, it's part of their context, and then it makes it more relevant to them.
Yes, and we're going to get into that in a
Education,
moment
right?
because people may be asking us, okay, I understood. It's completely out of context. We're going to talk about contextualization and we're going to talk about how this connects to language acquisition and more
Yeah.
importantly, to what we've been doing in the classroom with their students or what we haven't been doing in the classroom with their students.
And you guys can ask questions in the comments, okay? So make sure
Always
you,
in the comments
yeah,
and also in the chat. We're here in the
yes,
chat. Actually,
exactly.
I think I have
If
to
you're watching
refresh
us
the
on YouTube,
page.
just make sure you ask us questions, leave your comments, okay?
Yeah, for some reason. Okay. Now I can. Now I'm back. Okay,
Okay.
I wasn't being able to to take a look at the chat, but now I am back. Okay, good.
Okay,
Very
perfect.
nice. Very nice. So, uh, again, what Andre was saying, and we were saying, for our students that come from a place where people don't eat grape that much, or even for people who don't have, who are not Catholic. Who the hell's
Exactly.
Eve?
Yeah.
You know, why do I want to know whether Eve or Eva in Portuguese, why would I know if Eve actually saw the grape? And if
Yeah.
she saw it, why is it so important? Why do I have to know? Why do I need this information? And what Paulo Freire complained about that technique, about that approach, and actually, it's a method. About this method,
Yeah.
is that it's hollow. Why is it hollow? I know I talked about
Distant,
this in
right?
the
Yeah.
last Monday, I
Yeah.
guess. Yes, last Monday I talked about this. It's like having an empty box. Learning how to spell and how to pronounce certain sounds is not enough. You need to understand, you need a content, you need meaning, you know, and
Relevance, right? Yeah.
it has to be relevant.
Yeah.
Exactly. It has to be relevant. And these are things that kids, I dare say, kids, especially in Brazil, haven't been allowed to do.
Yes.
And but Rudy, I work at a school and I do that. I know, but we have to remember over 80% of our kids come from public schools. 80% of the
Yeah.
kids in Brazil, over 80%, they are in public schools. So we cannot use our bubble as an example.
Definitely.
It's not
Yeah.
an example.
If you work at a private school, it's a whole different ball game. It's
Yes.
really, really different. Yeah.
And still, we
Yeah.
are going to see if we've been actually doing that. Because sometimes we have
Yeah.
this feeling that oh no, I've been doing this, I've been respecting. But maybe not. Maybe
Yeah.
not. We're still going to talk about this. So going back to an empty box. So we must have a content. It must have meaning. It must be relevant to our students. And when
Exactly.
I say relevant to our students, and I think this is a very interesting cue for the next topic, I'm going to throw you the ball,
Yeah.
put the ball up in
But
the air, and all you got to
that's
do is
it.
dunk it.
Let's
Uh,
dunk it. All right.
just
Cool.
dunk it. There's
See,
basketball all
you're
over the
using
place.
you're using an analogy, so that's the perfect cook, man. Because
Uh,
that's
you
the
know,
thing, you know.
that's what we do. We be
Yeah.
cooking here, and
Yeah.
it must be relevant, and we must bring the universe of our students
Yes.
to the classroom. We
And
must
yeah.
bring the universe of our students to the classroom.
And again, that's why Paulo Freire was so revolutionary, because he was the person who broke from a faceless mass of students to something like every student is a subject and the co-author of their own learning, let's say, because they're building their learning together with their teachers, with their peers, right? And
Mhm.
one of the things that Rudy mentioned, why context, why background? Because your background is tangible, your background is concrete. You can
Yes.
very easily retrieve things from your background because you live them. It's part of your life, day-to-day life. And one of the things that we know, and this now specifically talking about neuroscience, is that we've actually seen a lot of research showing that it's much easier for the brain to deal with concrete things first and then move on to more abstract things. So if you are talking about Eva, who the heck is Eva? Where does she live? Why are we talking about this person? Why grape? This might be distant from your students.
Yeah.
Now, if you talk about someone in their families, a friend, themselves, the stuff that they use every day, the stuff that they eat every day, the stuff that they drink every day, it's much more tangible, much more concrete. And when you do that, again, going back to neuroscience, that means you are not going to flood their working memory with a lot of, abstract and distant information, and they will be better able to understand and even apply those things later on. But there's a catch here. We're not saying, Rudy and I are not telling you, hey, stop talking about abstract things. No,
Mm-mm.
no, at some point, of course, we're going to talk about abstract things. We want students to be able to talk about abstract things, but maybe and this is something that Paulo Freire did very well. Maybe start with the concrete, use your student's background. And so what do you like? What do you do? What is your prior knowledge? Again, this is neuroscience. Piaget talked about that. If you talk about something that is familiar,
Even
what's prior
and
knowledge?
Piaget talked about this even
Yeah.
before Paulo Freire.
Yes.
He talked about this before Paulo, but before.
Schema, remember?
And we also forgot to say something very important and extremely relevant about Paulo Freire. Everything he said and everything he studied was basically 40 years ago.
Exactly.
40 years ago.
Exactly.
One more time. No technology, no modern things, no terms
Actually,
that we
even
know
more,
nowadays.
man. We keep thinking that the 60s was like 40 years ago. It's almost like 80 years ago, man. I know it sounds
Don't make
crazy.
me do the math
but
here,
like
man.
70 years ago at
Don't
least.
make me do the math here, please,
Yeah.
man.
Because we keep thinking about the 60s like, it was 40 years ago. No, actually,
it's for us, right? For us.
It was more like 60 years ago, right?
Yeah, for us, it feels like, a couple of weeks ago. For us, because we're old. And remember, you're old as well. But he talked about this a long time ago in a situation or in a context where he didn't have the technology that we have nowadays. No terms. The term cognition basically didn't exist at that time, at that moment. It's the same when we talked about Noam Chomsky. Even though we do have a lot of things, we are very, very critical about what he said and about what he studied, researched. We have to hand it to him because what he did was groundbreaking for that time.
And
Paulo Freire as well.
Dude, let me add one thing. I mean, Paulo Freire was reading philosophy and he was reading politics at the time. So you can tell because I studied Jürgen Habermas, for example, and all of those guys who were talking about dialectic, were talking about, even about political activism, about breaking from oppression, So when Paulo Freire talks about all of those things, he's doing some, because, Paulo Freire became one of those names that people cannot talk about because it elicits a lot of things.
Like Voldemort.
Exactly. Because it elicits in the minds of many people bad things, things that should be forbidden. Same thing with the people he studied. He studied Habermas, he studied Karl Marx. So if you go, I know Rudy knows that, and everybody who's studied anywhere in the world knows that. When I was studying at the University of Bristol, there were posters about Karl Marx and some lecture at the university,
Yes.
But here in Brazil, you cannot even mention Marx's name because then you are a communist indoctrinator or whatever. And the same thing has been sort of attached to the name of Paulo Freire, right? It's like he wants to destroy the values of family, the righteous family, or whatever. Come on, guys.
And not only Paulo Freire, but I mean, sometimes you forget that Russia housed many philosophers and important philosophers.
Come on,
Marx, in our Vygotsky, yes. And if you like literature, we had Dostoevsky,
Oh yes,
with
definitely
with the brothers,
Karamazov,
Karamazov, exactly. Karamazov brothers. Man, that's a classic. So Russia housed many important thinkers and many important researchers. We're not talking about their political view. We're talking about their production. Their production is very relevant. The world recognizes it. So why shouldn't we recognize it? We recognize them as well. We're not talking about their political view. We're definitely not talking about their political view today, their current political view. We're analyzing the content that was researched, studied, and produced, decades ago. Going back to what we were saying about the concreteness, Tomasello, in his study from 2003, yes, 2003, he created like a continuum
Yeah.
or a schema. And he talks about the schema. You have two ends in that schema: linguistic dominance and cognitive dominance.
Yeah.
And he said, for people who are learning, or for people who are developing their language, infants, basically, for infants. For infants, it is much easier to understand the meaning of words or terms or chunks that rely on cognitive dominance. And then, of course, he talked about terms, he talked about chunks, but then he gave an example using isolated words. And he gave the example of, for example, proper names.
Yeah.
Why are easier for us and infants to understand and give meaning to proper names? Because we don't need to know the language in order to understand who Rudy is, who Andre is.
Yeah.
um, Family relationship, uh, a kid doesn't need to understand the language to understand who father is, who mother is. So this is cognitive dominance. The person or the infant needs to uh, or relies entirely on their on their cognition to develop these concepts. And linguistic dominance is much harder for people to understand and give meaning to. So, for example, prepositions. A
Yeah.
person needs to understand the language in order to understand prepositions, because it's required that the person understand the language or have linguistic dominance. Not only
And that,
understand
yeah.
determiners, conjunctions, like to.
Yeah.
The person needs to understand the language so that the person can give meaning to the word to.
Exactly.
And that
But
goes
verbs, right? You, I
verbs.
think,
Verbs
yeah.
verbs are in
It
the middle.
depends. Yeah. Yeah.
Verbs are halfway there,
Yeah. Yeah.
because um why halfway there? If I
Yeah.
say drive,
Hmm.
okay, it's halfway
Exactly.
there. You need
Yeah.
you need your cognition to understand, to give meaning to drive, but you also need, for example,
Yeah.
your linguistic dominance, enter, as well. So it's he included
Exactly.
that halfway there. But this is completely related to what you were saying about
Definitely
the uh
concreteness.
the
Yeah.
concreteness, and not only that, but the experience, the social background of our
Yeah.
students. We need to use those, everything that our students bring to the table, because
Exactly.
once we do that, it's going to be much easier for us to
And
understand.
yeah.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
no, no, I was going to say, if you look at how languages have evolved, I mean, this is, of course, speculation, but we can imagine that languages have become increasingly more complex. And the first words that were uttered, let's say, they were very concrete words. So they were either nouns, referring to objects or people, like you said, father, mother, brother, whatever, or rock,
Yeah.
or river, or tree, or those are probably the very first words that we uttered as human beings, because they're concrete right in front of you. And then and verbs, action, like go, run, hunt, kill, those are also very, very concrete words. And then as language became more and more complex, we added followers. We added words that were basically, establishing connections between those words, and then they became more and more abstract. So that's why, and here's the interesting thing: there's research showing that when I am presented with a list of words, and then after a couple of hours, I have to go back and take a test and retrieve those words. So I have to bring those words back to my working memory and remember them. I will much more likely remember the words that are concrete nouns, right? Because they create a powerful image in my head. So if I say, like, I don't know, a horse versus uh,
About.
about, yeah. But even think about a noun that is hard, like chemistry.
Yeah.
So horse versus chemistry. Maybe you remember something associated with chemistry, maybe because you thought of I don't know, whatever, like a chemical experiment or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
But you are much more likely to remember horse because then you can create an entire image of a horse because it's incredibly concrete, you know. So you see the difference, and why is that? Because it's easier for us to retrieve those words.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And still, I mean, why the social experience and the social background is really important and relevant here, because
yeah,
uh, again, how are you? Why would you use Eve? A person, let's say Eve is
yeah,
not a very well, at least not in Brazil, not anymore. But Eve is not Eva in Brazil is not a common name anymore. You know,
yeah,
uh, look at the path that the thread of thought of our students has to go through in order to get to to get to the desirable outcome or to the expected outcome. You need to understand Eve, and then you have to understand that Eve is a fictional character.
yeah.
You don't know anyone because that's the first thing you're going to do. You're going to try to do, simplistically speaking, when you hear the word Eve, you browse very fast, super fast in your mind. You're going to browse. Do I know any Eve? What Eve is the
Maybe
person
it's a
talking about?
religious
Is it religious?
connotation
Is
or
it not
something. Yeah, yeah,
religious?
yeah.
But I don't remember. But I'm not a Catholic. I have a different religious position. So you have to go through all that way in order to get to the point.
Yeah.
So that's why it causes cognitive overload. That's why what Ira said, it was boring.
Yes, and boring because it
It
didn't align with any of their
it doesn't
interests, right? Yeah,
communicate with our
yeah,
students. I'm not
yeah,
saying that we're not supposed to do that. We're not
yeah,
supposed to talk about abstract things. Again, no. But as you said, one of the problems that we've been facing in our educational system in Brazil is that we start from the abstract, and then
yeah,
at some point we talk about the concrete when it should be the other way around. Why?
yeah,
In linguistics, abstractness is generalization.
yeah.
So how are you going to start with the generalization with our students when they don't even have the foundation? So you need to start
There you
with the
go.
foundation. You need to start
What?
with concrete. And
Yeah,
again, when we talk about concrete things, we're not talking about concrete nouns or anything like that. No, we're talking about something that's close to our students. Even
exactly.
if even if it's abstract, let's say that the word, a super extreme example, let's say that you guys have a group of students, and for those kids, the word, the preposition to is very present, very common. The meaning is very solidified, you know. Yeah, that's concrete to them because it's close to them. It makes sense to them. It's part of their universe. Then you start from that point on. That's concrete to them. Lay the
Yeah,
foundation. Once you lay the foundation, then they are going to generalize. When we talk about in linguistics, when we talk about in language acquisition, when we talk about generalization, is that okay? I learned how to create that chunk, that phrase, for example. What if I include different words so I can try to express different situations, different
yeah,
events?
yes.
That's generalization, but you cannot start from that. You
So
have to
that's
start
the
with a
thing.
foundation.
The there's a study by I think five. Let me check their names here so I don't say anything stupid. Five McNeil and Borges. The benefits of concreteness fading for children's mathematics understanding, and basically the idea is that you start with the concrete example, so the model, and then other models if possible. So kids or whoever you're teaching, they can learn more effectively, and then you have to move to the abstract. Otherwise they will get stuck in the concrete models. And here's the
Yeah,
thing, abstract teaching is better for transference, you know. So basically when you transfer knowledge to other domains, or even within the same domain but different things, if you are stuck with a concrete model, you might not be able to make generalizations, or not
Mm-mm.
very good generalizations,
Yeah.
at least, you know. So the idea is that start with the concrete and then move to the abstract. And this is basically why Paulo Freire again was groundbreaking, because even today, and here's the thing that gets me angry and sad. People say that Paulo Freire has basically destroyed Brazilian education. Well, how, if we're not applying anything he taught us? You know,
Yeah.
we're actually doing exactly the same things we used to do when he was trying to get people to do other things. But
Hmm.
the idea is that, like Rudy said, we, in basically in any school you want to go to, what we do is we teach a top-down curriculum that was decided by whoever, probably not even, sometimes not even Brazilian people decided that.
Yeah.
Because even though Brazilians were involved in building the curriculum, we imported that from the United States or from Europe. And then we replicated, you know?
And
Yeah,
actually nowadays even worse.
yeah,
The curriculum, many curricula, have been based on textbooks.
that's the thing. So,
You
and
know.
so we're teaching from curricula that are very distant from our students' reality.
Yeah.
We're teaching very abstract things that don't apply in their context, basically. And we are teaching as if they were a faceless mass and not a subject or the author, the agent of their own learning. That's why Ira, when he said the things Rudy read, is still relevant today, because you ask any student, they will feel bored. They will feel like, hey, I don't get a say. I don't have a say in what I want to learn, what I'm interested in learning. And
Yeah.
again, we know it's hard to implement what Paulo Freire wanted, you know, it's very hard, but there are certain ways we can work towards that, right?
And something has to be made clear here,
Yeah.
because let me see who said that. Dora talked about personalization.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
well, we have to be very careful with this term, Dora, because personalization may imply that we need to go through each student and do whatever is relevant to them personally. If you have a very large group, if you have a group of
Yeah.
30 students, that's not going to be possible. That's not what we're saying. When we say what we're saying, when you use the word or the term personalization, what I understand, and what has to be clear here, is that we need to we need to look at our students as a person full of
Yes.
content, full of anxieties, full of expectations, full of a lot of perfections and imperfections. So when you talk about personalization, this has to be clear. And we need to understand what these are. We need to understand what their goals are, what their expectations are. And then we need to try to find a way to put everybody in the group together
Yeah.
and reach the ultimate goal.
And
That's why it's
Tasia
hard.
mentioned in the chat, you see, context is essential. It's about context, really, you know?
That's perfect,
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
the fantastic cue for context. This is another thing that we also have to be very careful. Why?
Yeah.
Many of you guys may say, "But yeah, all my lessons have been contextualized and etc." Blah 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 blah. Hmm. Okay, really? Have they? Have they really?
Yeah.
Because when we talk about context and contextualization, and Paulo Freire talks about this, and Ira as well, and everybody that has been resonating the words of Paulo Freire, and we have been resonating it. Actually, we are resonating it right now. The words of Paulo Freire and his studies. Uh, Contextualization is bringing the universe of our students to the classroom and not doing whatever they like. There's a big difference
Yeah.
between these two things, and we have to be very careful with that. If you still use um, exercises that are not very effective for language development, and you use this is the an example that when we were preparing the episode today, I used this
Yeah.
example with other. If you use Pokemon or
Yeah.
Naruto or Dragon Ball or in our
Or
when we were
Cristiano
kids.
Ronaldo. I'll
Or
give an example
yes,
later. Yeah,
you use
yeah,
the example of Cristiano Ronaldo.
yeah,
If you use Cristiano Ronaldo, consider, oh no, because my students, everybody knows Cristiano Ronaldo.
yeah.
That may not be part of their universe just because they know Cristiano Ronaldo. They
Yeah,
know who he is. You know, if your
exactly.
exercise are still not very efficient for language acquisition, your results will still be the same.
Yeah,
You're still going to have to be constrained by that kind of activity. And you also have another obstacle, another constraint, which is this. Oh no, because everybody knows who
yeah.
Cristiano Ronaldo is. Yes, but are you sure that
How
100% of their
relevant
exactly,
is Cristiano Ronaldo to those students? You know.
exactly,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
maybe if you ask about something, considering public schools here in Brazil, for instance,
yeah,
if you talk about a community leader
yep,
or someone that does a lot of stuff in their community, that's going to be more relevant to them,
yep,
and it's going to be easier for them. The path for meaning creation and
yeah.
absorption is going to be much faster and shorter than using Cristiano, because they see Cristiano Ronaldo
Exactly.
on TV, and then we have to assume that they have cable, they have internet.
Yeah.
Again, we're
And
talking
even if
about
they know him, man, and that's the thing. And Dora has been mentioning here, so here's, I told Rudy an example that something that I did with my Italian students a couple of years ago. So I was teaching online remotely, and we were learning I was teaching a very basic lesson that was about colors. And if you look at most course books, they will have colors. Maybe they will have a square, and then you have to color the square using a colored pencil or whatever. But I was teaching colors to a group of teenagers or preteens, and that's boring. That's very childish, right? And I said, hey, that doesn't make any sense. And some other books, they will get celebrities, and maybe they're wearing a colored dress, a red dress or whatever. Again, distant from their reality. So I asked them to go around their city, take a picture of whatever they chose, whatever scenario, whatever landscape they chose, and choose one or two colors from that picture, upload that to Google Classroom, and tell me why they chose those colors, why the colors were relevant to them, right? So, in this very simple activity, I got to know my students better because they took a picture of where they live. So I got to, where are you guys coming from? They were coming from the actually the southeastern coast of Italy. So they were coming from Melfi, Bari, Puglia. I have never been there, but then through their pictures, I could actually see a little bit of who they were, their background, and they chose the color. So again, this is much more relevant to them than getting a random celebrity from a book and
yeah.
analyzing what color they're wearing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
Yes.
the point. And that's what
That's
Paulo Freire advocated for, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And even though he was talking about this over 60 years ago, now
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
feeling a
yeah.
little bit
60,
insecure.
yeah, 60, man.
Is it 60? You
But
know, I'm not good
yeah,
at
he
numbers,
read the
man.
book in 68. So that was like, yeah,
Not good with numbers.
68.
You know,
Yeah.
I'll start. We'll have to have a calculator open in our laptops here, because every here and then we talk about years and decades, and we constantly
and
make
and we
stupid
are not
mathematical
very good
mistakes.
at math because we're English teachers. Plus, we have to answer Samuel's question,
Yeah, we're
Dora,
getting there. Yeah,
and ELT in Brazil. Thank you for
sure.
joining us, folks. Okay.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure. But still, even though he was talking about this a long time ago, let's go with a long time ago, because it doesn't
That's
require any
easier. Yeah.
math, any calculation here. But even though he was talking about this a long time ago, uh, this is now for cognitive linguistics. We understand this as a central point for language development.
Yeah.
Why, again, why are we going to do this? Why are we going to open the textbook and say, look, let's use, they are talking about a very distant celebrity, even though they like the celebrity. Does that really communicate with the student? And if it does, let's say that everybody is a Swiftie nowadays, right? Kids love Taylor Swift, and
Yeah.
let's say that they are big fans of Taylor Swift. Uh, fine. They buy their her albums. They
Yeah, yeah.
listen. They don't buy albums anymore, but anyway, they listen
They
to Taylor
download
Swift.
their.
Yeah, they don't download. They
They don't
listen to
even
them on
download anything
Spotify. Yeah,
anymore in
that man, we're
Spotify.
so old, man.
Yeah.
We're
We used to
so
download
old.
music, folks.
We're
Remember
so
when
old.
it really sucked and then we had to spend like the whole night
Yeah.
downloading a whole album?
A
Yeah,
whole album?
that's
Damn,
how
dude.
old
I
we
had to
are.
spend the whole night to download like 3
Yeah,
songs.
yeah.
And but anyway, so
Dialed connection.
oh,
That was
yeah, that was the worst.
yeah,
So let's assume that we do have a group of students, and they are Swifties. They are super fans of Taylor Swift. They follow her on social
yeah,
media, etc., etc., etc. Fine, that's fine. But we also have to make sure that the activity that we are assigning to our students, it's actually contextualized. It's not
yeah.
just using Taylor Swift because they know who Taylor Swift is. Because I could have, using Paulo Freire's example, I could have said Taylor Swift saw the grape.
Yeah. Again, it doesn't make sense, right?
It
Yeah,
still doesn't make any sense. So that's why we also have to be very careful with the activity that we are designing,
yeah.
and starting to answer where is he? Samuel, right? He asked us a question.
Yes. So
you know
Samuel asked something.
present
And
some cultural and international aspects. We're not saying that we're not supposed to talk about international aspects,
yeah,
but what we have to do, and again, I'm using Taylor Swift as an example.
yeah.
First, make sure, and in the book,
Start with the concrete, then you
yes,
move to right.
you can do this. So you have some options. You can start with the
Yeah,
concrete. So if you're teaching a group of kids in the public system, in the public educational system,
yeah.
uh, maybe a community leader, that's very important because it's close to them. And then you generalize, or you make it more abstract. You say, okay,
Exactly.
Taylor Swift. If it's not Taylor Swift, you can use Anita, even
Yep.
even though Anita is from Brazil, but she's too far fetched. Too far
Yeah.
fetched. It's a
But
different
man, Taylor Swift
atmosphere.
actually, you gave a great example because Taylor Swift. I think imagine you're teaching something like I don't know sustainability and climate change. And just today we were talking before we connected here. Today there was a huge wildfire in Brazil,
Yeah,
in the south of Brazil, in São Paulo.
yeah,
And I am 900 kilometers away from, actually like almost 600 kilometers away from where it happened. And the smoke is everywhere here. There's
yeah,
smoke everywhere. So this is context, this is background. Everybody's living this. And Taylor Swift is a very good example because Taylor Swift apparently is the person who pollutes the world the most based on, because she's a billionaire and she has a private jet and she's always on tour, so she's traveling all over the world with her jet, polluting. So again, these
yeah.
are the crazy connections that you have to try to make when you're teaching, because it becomes relevant. You
Yes.
can start with, okay, we have a problem, everybody has the same problem, climate change. Take a look at what's happening now. And then you get someone they like, Taylor Swift. Let's analyze her impact on the planet. And then
Yeah.
you open a footprint calculator and you have all the students check their impact on the planet
Yeah.
based on their consumption, based on their community. That's how a
Yeah.
lesson should flow.
We're
Yeah.
going to talk about this in a moment. We're going to wrap up this episode with this, talking about some another exclusive feature of the club. But if you think about a lesson plan, so you start with climate change, and then the mid part would be something related to the students' impact on climate change, and then a final and completely free activity. They compare their footprint with Taylor Swift's
There you
probable
go. See?
footprint.
Yeah.
So that's not a full lesson, but then you have a very contextualized lesson.
Yeah.
You start from concrete and you end up with something completely abstract and completely far-fetched, because chances are they'll never get to know Taylor Swift, and they'll never get to say, hi, Taylor Swift, I'm a huge fan of yours. They'll never get it. They'll never get this
But I'm
chance.
never coming to your show because you're polluting the world, or something.
Yeah,
They
assuming
won't
that
say
she
that.
is. I don't know. Maybe she is. Maybe she is, and
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
But that's how you. That's how you bring this the international
Yeah,
aspects you were talking about, Samuel. But
in a
and
critical way,
also
right?
this is one way to
Questioning.
do that.
Yeah,
The other way is to not the other way, but you also have to be very careful with the kind of activity, because again, if you keep doing the activity that are not the activities assigning, sorry, if you keep assigning the activities that are not very uh, language development friendly,
yeah,
you still have the same results. Even if you talk about Taylor Swift, even if you talk about Anita, if you talk about Cristiano Ronaldo, whoever is part of, even if you
yeah,
talk about their community leader,
yeah,
if the activity is not very good for language development, you'll still have the same result. So you have to make a combination. There are many metrics. Actually, if you're a language teacher and you're teaching a foreign language,
yeah.
use the Common European Framework. That's a very nice metric that we have, especially the updated version of the Common European Framework, because now they've included some social aspects to measuring the progress, the
Exactly.
linguistic progress of your student. So bring that, use that. You're going to design a lesson. Ask yourself many times if that activity is actually going to help your students
Yeah.
achieve the goal that you expected. This
And
is
man,
very important.
yeah. So basically, what you're saying is be critical about your choices for in terms of pedagogy of approach, method, technique, strategy. That's what Paulo Freire asked, and we're not doing that very effectively. We're simply replicating what we've inherited from other people who've inherited from other people, and we're basically applying the same old. And that's why our educational system is not the best. And this
Yeah.
is not even because we need to wrap up. This is not even the worst element here. The worst element here, folks, is that Brazil is a country with a lot of social gaps,
Yeah.
not just one, but many types of social gaps you can think of. And one of the most important ones is that public education, as Rudy said, accounts for more than 80% of Brazilian students. Those people do not have access to the best of the worlds.
Yeah.
So if you want to have some kind of education as envisioned by Paulo Freire, honestly, you have to go to a very expensive school here in Brazil with the right mindset. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. What we're trying to say here is that Paulo Freire is not really the reason why Brazil fails at so
Yeah.
many levels, ranking, whatever you want to call it. It's exactly the opposite. It's because we're not incorporating his
It's our
ideas into
fault.
the education. Yeah, it
It's
is
our
our fault.
fault.
It
It's our
is.
fault as a country, and
Yeah,
it's our fault as an institution, as
yeah,
schools, and it's our fault as teachers, as country, because but Brazil is almost 524 years old. So for the last 424 years old, the educational system has been used to segregate the privileged people from the
yeah,
poor people. It's been used as an instrument only for people who want to actually go to the workforce or get inserted into a workforce, not necessarily to generate critical
yeah,
thinkers. That's that's to blame on the country, the schools, because schools, of course, they many times they try to implement what's easier and more comfortable to them. So they don't always have, as you said, Andre, they don't always have the right mindset. They say, okay, so
exactly.
nowadays, oh, this is the textbook. Okay, so this is going to be my curriculum, or this is going to be my syllabus. All you got to do is follow the teachers. Teachers follow the syllabus, and they
Yeah,
also give in to parents, because then parents are going to come in and
they're gonna
complain.
complain.
Oh, you
Yes.
didn't use all the exercise, didn't
Yeah.
use all the book, blah 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 blah. And they say, okay, I'm so sorry, parents.
Yeah.
You pay a monthly fee, so you're right. My teachers are wrong.
Yeah.
So this is another aspect
You
of the
got to keep the
educational.
clientele happy,
Exactly.
Yeah,
So this is the other pillar for the failure of the educational system in Brazil. And the other
exactly.
pillar, ourselves, we teachers, we have to
Yes.
think about the activities. Don't think that you've been contextualizing your lessons just
Yeah.
because you're doing what your students like or
Yeah.
bringing whatever name of celebrity that your students may or may not know. You know,
Exactly.
that doesn't mean that.
Beyond that.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
beyond that. It's bringing their
Yeah.
universe. You need to have a clash of universes here. Bring their universe.
Exactly.
You need to pay attention to your students. You need to pay attention to, and Ira and Paulo Freire say this in this dialogue for pedagogy for liberation. You have to pay attention and bring their
Exactly.
universe to the classroom. So these are the three pillars
Yeah.
for our failed educational system in
Yeah.
Brazil.
And
Paulo Freire.
man, exactly. Paulo Freire didn't he wanted to break from that. And Rudy mentioned something. We have 514 years of let's say
No,
modern
24.
history.
24.
24, sorry, yeah.
See math.
Well, not even, yeah, see, not even modern history, but since the colonization period, and of course, but we have a much richer history before that with Native Americans who were living here,
Yeah.
and we've broken from the type of education that they had. So we have received an oppressive model that came from the Jesuits, church, that has been replicated in different levels of society and everything. But we have not really gone back to a model of education where people learned through interacting with nature, with each other, which is something that our natives did very well.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to salvage that, Again, that's the whole point of pedagogy of the oppressed, is understanding how and why people are oppressing and limiting your views, so you can break from that and use instrument as a tool to change a person who will then change the world.
Yeah.
That's what Paulo Freire said. Education doesn't change the world. Education changes people, and people change the world.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
as soon as you understand why you are being oppressed, why you cannot talk about certain things, why you cannot teach and learn certain things, and then you become an instrument of liberation as well, an
Yes.
agent of liberation, right?
Yes.
That's our
Absolutely right.
goat, right, Rudy? Come
That's
on.
Paulo Freire. And that's
That's that.
why,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
Eve did not see the grape, man.
No, it's not
A
about
Eva
Eve
viu a
seeing the
uva.
grape. Come
No, a
on.
Eva não viu a uva.
No.
Eve did not see the grape. All right.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, guys, first of all, thank you so much for everybody that's joined us throughout this episode today here.
Yes.
Quick
Thank
reminders,
you.
if you really like this episode, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button that we have here. It's really important that you do that. If you like the
Please do.
episode, click the like button. This is going to
And
show
subscribe
us.
too, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is going to show us that we've been doing good things. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell, because when you subscribe to the channel and click on the little bell icon, you're going to be notified every time Chá Pedagógico is live. So you don't have to, oh, are we going to, is this the Sunday that we're going to have a Chá Pedagógico episode? No, you don't have to do that. If you subscribe to the channel and click on the little bell icon, YouTube is going to do that for you. They're going to notify you every time that we're live, and you can join us. Don't forget to take a look at our socials here, because we do have a very exclusive members club for Chá Pedagógico.
Yes.
The very interesting thing is that from now on, this members of this club will also have access to lesson plans, right?
Oh, yes.
Lesson plans.
And Tassia is asking, how can we contextualize considering a whole group? So make sure you follow our members club, because we'll be sharing a lot of interesting things for you to critically analyze how you can implement them in your lessons, right?
Yes.
So make sure you look for Chá Pedagógico on Patreon, okay?
Yes. Or take a look at our socials, because you're going to
Yeah.
find the link in our bios, so you get redirected to the members club.
Exactly.
I don't know about you, dude, but today I was drinking a very delicious black tea from Shamachi. Hey, Shamachi.
Shamachi, yes.
Why don't you sponsor us? That's going to be so cool. Hey, Shamachi, sponsor us.
Okay,
Mine was black tea. Black tea. Very delicious black tea. Hey,
And
Shamachi, it's
we are
in the
wearing the
title.
t-shirts.
You know, it's in the title. Come,
And we have the
come.
mugs.
And we
So
also have the
Shamachi, come
mugs.
on.
This is the last thing I promise. Keep taking a look at our socials, because we are going to have another next week. We're going to have another session of the study group. We're going to yes, we do have a study group for members of the club. We're going to share a link. If you guys are interested in taking part of the study group, all you got to do is click on the link, send us some very brief information such as email address and all these things, and you guys are going to be notified when the study group, and the study group is going to dissect the conversation that we had today, right?
I like that verb. Perfect. That's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
By the way, before we go, I just heard that today is Tamiri's mother's birthday. So,
oh, really? Okay.
Tamiris, please extend my best wishes to your mom.
Best wishes to your mom, okay?
Yes.
Happy birthday, Tamiri's mom. You
Yes.
rock.
Yes.
Because you gave us Tamiris and she rocks.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
The guys, Lyrica, Eric, Tamiris, Jessica, our big sister, everybody from Disal, thank you so much for hosting another episode of Chá Pedagógico.
Yes.
Dude, take care, man.
Thank you. Take care and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And we'll see you here when we come back together. Stay tuned. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.